My name is Steve Wojtowecz. It's probably the last time you'll ever hear me say my last name. Everyone that knows me calls me Woj. And if we have time at the end of the session, I can tell you the story as to how I got the name. I found it interesting. Some people laugh, other people can relate. But I've been with IBM 22 years. I've held just about every position you can imagine in software in IBM, distributed software. I know how to spell Z. But I've done everything from architecting products. One I'm actually pretty proud of, OS2. Unsuccessful yet, still proud. Kind of like some of my kids. I've done level 3, I've done level 2. I've done support. I've helped code the OS2 LAN server kernel. I've done a lot of stuff. It has been a decade or so since I've coded, so I won't claim to be able to do that anymore. I do know how to speak sometime around, whether we're talking Flex or Dojo, but I couldn't tell you what the heck the difference between the two are. What I want to do today is I want to just spend, 30, 45, an hour, depending on how much interaction I get from you all. If you all sit there and look at me like it's Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, it'll go quick. I'm going to ask some questions, I'm going to probe. What I want to try and do is I want to try and lay out the landscape of what you're going to see for the rest of the day today and where I see the market and technologies in general going into the future for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Okay? I'm not going to claim to be able to predict what's going to happen in 2020, but I think I got a pretty good idea what's going to happen in the next couple of years and the things that we're trying to do to address it from a software. And I threw in a couple of slides kind of towards the end on some really interesting research projects. One research project we have going on right now that kind of goes out to 2020. Okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great. Remind me too, if anybody asks a question and I don't repeat it, make me repeat it so that people on the webcast can hear what we said. Okay? So, quick questions. How many of y'all's IT budgets are growing at more than 10% a year? Put your hand down, you're lying. Whose data is growing less than 20% year on year? Excellent. You're lying too. Oh, no, I'm kidding. So this data represents typical environments out there where the data, the IT budgets are flat or growing modestly at best, right? That bottom line. And the data is just growing extremely fast. And as you see, the difference between the blue line and the red slope here is this issue we have of, what are we going to do to manage all this data? Is it good data? Is it bad data? Do we need it? Do we not need it? Are we scared to get rid of it? Yes, for lots of reasons, right? From a budget perspective, on average, about 25% of all of our IT budgets around storage is for labor. The rest is hardware and software. Is that about true for everyone? Or don't you know? About true. Got a lot of people shaking their heads, right? We all know that we're being asked to do a tremendous amount more with that labor number, right? So our efficiency and our effectiveness has to continue to go up because of that picture on the left. Complexity. Who is not embarking on virtualization? It's working so far, right? Like a good lawyer, I don't ask a question I don't know the answer to. So virtualization, both servers and storage, continue to roll out. And you'll see here in the next year or two that almost half of the storage footprints are going to be created due to virtualized servers. The data that virtualized servers are spitting out. And competitiveness, right? Been true in the past. It's a safe slide, safe bet to say it's going to be true in the future. And we're all focusing on similar things. Driving down the cost per terabyte, right? Figuring out how to become more efficient. What do we do about retention, both for business purposes and for government regulations? Availability and uptime and serviceability and all the things that are required as part of an IT department. Okay? Any questions or comments so far? Setting the stage okay? Landscape is good? Excellent. So, technology evolution, right? Arguably, what we have today works. Right? It works. I mean, it may not be the best of all worlds, but it works, right? But my high-tech animation here. We got to get smarter. Right? We got to get better. All of these things, I'm assuming, are part of what the heck am I going to do? How do I solve some of these things? Can some of these value attributes on the right-hand side in blue, can they help me do my job? Right? Now, if you look on the right-hand side here, are any of these extremely important to you? Number one, absolutely number one. By far and away number one. How about one or two? Anything? Which one?
Extreme scalability.
Extreme scale. Okay. You're looking for more dense data on the devices? Good. Okay, we're all half asleep. That's okay. I'll get you going. So, from an IBM Tivoli perspective, when I'm looking at plans and when I'm looking at what I'm doing to build and what I try and bring value to our client base, I kind of look at it in three ways. And I'm going to show you this, and give you this message in a couple of different ways. But the first one is this notion of protection. Protect the data, protect the infrastructure, protect the notion of our business and the business continuity. Because the reality is, the reason we're storing all this data is we assert that it has value. Right? If it didn't have value, you wouldn't keep it. Now, the value could be business value. It could be the fact that my boss tells me I got to keep it. It could be the fact that the government requires me to keep it for who knows why. But the fact is, we keep the data, we got to protect the data. Okay? We got to get more efficient. Virtualization has the promise and the expectation of being more efficient and help you to improve utilization, availability, and as you can see here, some of the hardware platforms and solutions that we provide to help in this notion of virtualization. And then, of course, last is we're always looking to optimize. Optimize, instrument, automate, be more efficient in how we manage things, understand the data that we have, figure out what are we going to do with it, how, do we move it, do we keep it where it is, tier 1 through N storage, all these types of things. What do we have to do to be able to instrument and automate and optimize the solutions in the other two areas around protection and virtualization? Historically, what I've seen, and I'd be interested to see if anyone is on a different journey, but over time, clients' infrastructures typically start at the left, where you have islands of servers and direct attached storage and NAS or SANs or whatever the case may be. You look to optimize its infrastructure, protect in the very early stages of these unique islands of systems, and you progress through management, and I happen to, and a pitch wouldn't be complete without a notion of cloud. But let me just talk about alternative delivery styles. Okay, cloud just happens to be one. AAS, as a service could be one. Right, all these types of things. But we got it over time. The infrastructure in all clients tends to get more optimized, virtualized, standardized, and tried to be positioned in a way that you can then take advantage of the investment that you've had over time and deliver it in multiple ways to satisfy the business need, to provide continuity to the business. Okay? So let me just ask a general question. When you think about what projects you want to do for 2012, do you look at, I need to buy more storage hardware, I need more licenses of software, roll out a new application? Or are your managers, your line of business executives, your leaders, are they coming to you and saying, our most important business process is this, and you need to help us keep 100% availability and uptime for this application, this business process? How do you folks think about what your plans are for the next 6 to 12 months. Is it roll more stuff in? Is it buy more software? Hire 2 or 3 more admins? Or is it, what do I need to do to keep that application available? What do I need to do to improve my SLA by 20%? How are you measured? How do you make decisions? None of you make decisions? None of you have plans? I can be quiet longer than you can. Somebody can be brave. Project-based, business model-based, application-based, database admin in your ear. What? Application owner? What?
Customer need base.
Customer need.
Yeah.
Who's your customer?
Many customers.
So it's outside.
Widgets, yeah.
Okay. And as part of that, I can assert that your most valuable customers drive your most important business process.
Correct.
Okay. And as part of that business construct, there's this notion of a continuity to the entire business process.
Correct.
Right? We've got applications, we've got web servers, we've got databases, we got storage devices and networking problems, and how do we keep it up, and how do we answer the calls when it's broken, and response time, and blah blah blah. Right? It's the whole notion of business continuity
Yes.
for whatever the business is.
Correct.
Right? Thank you for that. You were getting uncomfortable with the silence?
A little bit.
All right, cool. I'll look at you next time. So, I personally am a visual learner. Big animal pictures work for me, so I decided to put one in. 3 stages. What do we do? What is our storage strategy? We're going to protect the information and the information infrastructure. Physical, virtual, data, applications. Okay? Second thing we're going to do is we're going to optimize the infrastructure. That is, providing the protection of all of that really important high-value data. Because remember, the reason we're keeping it is because it's important. I'm not going to ask you the real hard question as to why is your data important to you? Couldn't even figure out how you spend your money, so I'm not going to answer that question. And the third part here is, how do we instrument it for alternative delivery models? Right? Is anyone not thinking about cloud? Whew. Got 1,000 so far, fantastic. So everyone's thinking about cloud. Most think they have a start of a private cloud. Some may be taking advantage of delivering public clouds. But the reality is this alternative delivery style of a service, and in our case, backup, archive, storage management, data protection, storage capacity, things like that. We're all looking to be more efficient and optimizing the things that we have. People, software, and hardware. Anyone want to debate so far? We good so far? Okay. So, why are we doing that? Well, I contend that we should think about how do we stop storing so much. How do we do that? Obviously, there's some technologies that you can do around incremental backups and deduplication and compression and things like that. But the real value is stop storing so much. Remember that slope on that very first picture, right? It's exponential. Pretty soon it's going to become vertical, right? Moving data to the right place. Everyone's tiers of storage, 0 through 2, 3, 4, they all cost the same? That was an easy question. The answer is no. There you go. Thank you very much. Fantastic. It doesn't cost the same, and therefore the notion of efficiency is the cost per, just to store things. Moving data to the right place, and it's all based on how fast do you need to get the data, right? Do you need to just be able to search it? What's the responsiveness around an SLA? I would suspect that you may want to have data on tier 0 and 1 on your very most business critical client-facing applications, as you might for long-term historical records management. You may not have to have a sub-second response time to that data for a government probe or something, right? Or your board of directors asking for some data, right? Store more with what's on the floor, virtualization and provisioning. How many of you had a request from a DBA or an application owner saying, you know what, I need 65 terabytes of data set aside for my application because it's going to rock everyone's world, right? And what do you give them, you know, 30 gig maybe, right? Right? And they're saying, fantastic, appreciate it, thank you very much. You know, when it comes to evaluation time, I'm going to give you 3 stars, right? You can't give them what they want. You got, you know, this notion of thin provisioning, right? Simple concept, but it's incredibly valuable. And then raising the service level with your staff. The first slide, we said, you know, anywhere between 20 to 25% of all of our money is spent on people, labor, right? How do we raise the service levels of the people that we have, doing things that are most critical in support of our clients' applications or business process? Okay. Bringing in this notion of service continuity. Okay, I said service continuity several times because I view the long-term value that we provide as IT folks around storage is not being the reason why a business process fails. Right? Sometimes it's nice to be in focus. When we're talking about storage, the only time you get a phone call is when something is not working. Is that right? Yeah. See? I'm an IBM, it doesn't change. Same thing with Rent, right? You do your job, it's what expected. Something breaks, you didn't do your job. Let me talk to you about why you didn't do your job and what are you going to do? What are you going to do to fix it so it doesn't fail again? Those are the long discussions I had. All right, so if you think about this notion of service continuity, the InfoPro actually did a study, and obviously a large number of customer pain points, and they came out with a fairly large number of client initiatives, of which, you know, virtualization, improving backup and archiving, you know, information lifecycle, tiering, you know, all the things that, you know, we've been working on for a very long time, right? And we're going to continue to do, continue to get better. But the thing that was very interesting to me is this notion of analytics and business intelligence, right? Typically, this, you know, it's not thought of as doing analytics on storage or the actual data that's stored. So that's an interesting concept. I'm not sure what it's going to mean, what the vendor's going to do about it. I'll tell you that we are working on analytics packages inside of IBM for our portfolio around TPC and being able to do, you know, better reporting and long-term analytics and being able to do search and discovery in our archive and all those types of things. But to me, analytics is a means to an end. And the reason we analyze things is to try and get some kind of insights to improve our business, typically, right? And so if you take a look at all these initiatives and pain points over to the right-hand side, you'll see that these 5 things on the right-hand side, optimizing the data footprint, utilizing infrastructure, store loads on the floor, global data management, virtualization and heterogeneous environments, map very well to what I consider our most important client values, what I'm trying to do. So it was a good validation for me that says what we're doing is right, and do it in a way that can continually to progress how efficiently and how you can optimize your infrastructure for your specific business objectives. Now, coming back to this notion of service continuity, we all know that there's different levels of RPOs, RTOs, SLAs, you know, instantaneous data recovery to, you know what, if worse comes to worse, I can wait hours or days for my, you know, archive to be brought back online, right? And we all have a large, you know, disparate set of customers out there, internal customers, who think they have a say in what we do every day, from the backup admin all the way up to our CIOs, CTOs, CEOs, et cetera. And there's capabilities that we, as a company, hardware, software solution company, are going to continue to do to help you win what I call the everyday knife fight. Okay? how do you do better, continuous data protection and snapshots and replication? How do we get better at, our backups and what we do around virtual environments and deduplication and the things that we battle every day, right? The fires that we fight. In addition to, from a business perspective, what is our executives are looking for, right? They're looking for business continuity, cross-domain value, heterogeneous and flexible, so I don't have vendor lock-in, right? Maybe not vendor lock-in. Worst case scenario is I have two in there so I can have one fight against the other for price. I mean, these are all the things we deal with every day, right? But all of these things are progressing towards this notion of service continuity. Okay? The business service that we deem as valuable to our client base. Could be our internal users, could be our external customers, externally facing web applications, web content, internal email systems, database administrators, you pick it. But it's all about understanding the RPO, RTO, and the downstream client, internal or external, and driving a notion of continuity of the service for whatever that consumer of the service is. Okay? Now, I tried very, very hard. Anybody watch SpongeBob? All right. And whenever he says, story time, right? I got a couple of stories. So I'm going to take you through a couple of scenarios and just kind of talk about what we're doing to actually improve this notion of an outcome around service continuity. I'm going to try and do this from memory, but I got a couple of cheat sheets. So IBM Boulder, IBM internal data center. Okay? As one might imagine, with 400,000 plus employees, we have a few emails flying around. Okay? And I don't know, I suspect IBM is unique in the way, in that when someone sends me a file that's 3 or 4 megabytes with an attached document to it, and they copy 67 people, 50 of those people, for some reason, need to say, reply to all, great job, with attachment. Right? I'm sure that doesn't happen in your world. It doesn't happen in yours. It does happen in ours. So we have a unique situation here. Right? So the Lotus Notes is stored in Boulder. And up until a couple of years ago, you can imagine, we were storing petabytes worth of data, email data, documents and attachments, PowerPoint and Excel and Adobe files and who knows what else. It could be videos and home pictures for all I know. But it was a lot of data. And so what they decided to do is they said, look, we're going to do a couple of things here. Woj, from now on, your mailbox is capped at 300 meg. All right. So, being the good user of Lotus Notes, I immediately got to 300 meg and got to be like 320, and I got a warning. Fired off from my data center guys, saying, hey, you're over your limit, right? We're going to shut you off. Either that or you got to pay for more data, more storage. I said, you got it, executive at IBM, they're not going to shut me off. 2 days later, you're at 330. Last and final warning. Yeah, try me. What's going to happen, right? They're going to delete my stuff? No way. Friday morning, come in, go to log on, type this really long, nice, flowing email, fantastic. Send. Sorry, your email's been shut off. Contact your administrator, reduce your mail size. Here are all the steps to reduce your mail size, blah, blah, blah. And I went, you gotta be kidding. Email kept flying in. I went to go file something. Sorry, can't do that. Send a response. Sorry, can't do that. All of a sudden, I'm paralyzed. I can't do email, right? I thought it was going to be a gift, right? No email? What could be worse? What could be better, right? But so what we did is we actually they took a step back and said, okay, for people like Sam Palmisano, who's our CEO, and a bunch of other folks that live in Armonk, we're probably not going to turn those folks off, right? So they basically said the SLA for those folks are, multiple copies of their data in case the mailbox gets corrupted. We're never going to turn them off. They can grow as fast as they want. Immediate response time, servers on site and local, store all their data for forever, for lots of reasons, internal reasons and SEC reasons, lots of other reasons. But for those folks, the SLA is going to be the best you can get, and we're going to spend as much money as we need to support. However, folks like me, right? You get over 300 meg, you're turned off. We'll give you 2 warnings, right? We're going to turn you off. Now, there's a long process you can go through to get more storage and all that, but the fact of the matter is, IBM took it upon itself to reduce its its mailbox sizes, its storage size, its need to keep petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of duplicated, reduplicated in files, and put it upon me from a business perspective that says you have to manage your inbox. Okay, took it down to only a couple of petabytes, managing it worldwide, and was it painful to start? Sure. Did I have to change my way I thought of things? Yes. Is it the end of the world? No. Right? And then IBM made a decision that, based on its SLAs and its business process, these were deemed the most important. I was deemed in the lower categories not as important, and I had to make some trade-offs. Okay? Story number 1. Story number 2. IBM Rochester, New York, not Minnesota. I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but they got a few buildings on campus. Back in 2009, they decided, 2008, 2009. IBM, by the way, has several, deemed certified green buildings. Okay, green, energy efficient, all these types of things. The building was already built, so it wasn't like they could go in and put bamboo flooring in, which, is just another part of green. But what we decided to do here is we actually took one building and started to instrument, figuring out, what are the things we could do to instrument the building to become more efficient and become a bleeding edge, smart building. Right? That's what the little icon there means, smart building. So over the course of the year, we actually installed 240,000 sensors. Everything from, motion detected video cameras for security, to badge, we already had badge readers, those were events, to flows in the restrooms, right? How many, you go into a restroom sometimes, and the water seems to be psh, as you walk in and no one's in there and the water psh, right? Pretty inefficient. Light switches, motion detected light switches, airflow events, right? What's the temperature? Does the temperature need to be higher or lower, et cetera, et cetera. 240,000 sensors. We capture an event for 15% of those sensors every 15 minutes. So 15% every 15 minutes of those 240,000 users, which, by the way, represents about 20 million captured events per week. Now, some of those events are bits of data we got to store, bits, right? Some of it we don't even store, right? Motion detector, some of you have probably seen you walk into a room and the lights pop on automatically. Do we really want to store that? No. Could we? Yes. Chosen not to. However, what about a motion detected video surveillance of a 30-second snapshot of someone walking outside the door at 2:30 in the morning? Might want to keep that, right? Right? Now, if you didn't know what the data was, one might think, well, you know what? We get a lot of these little bits ones. Let's keep those because they don't take up any room, right? And we get these once a week, once every 2 weeks. And I get these gigabyte files coming in from the stupid camera. We're going to ditch those son of a guns, right? Because they're going to take them up, right? That's not the way it's going to work, right? So again, TSM, TPC on the back end in the building, IBM hardware in the building. By the way, the data center in Boulder has all IBM stuff too. And we've created policies to capture the data, capture the events, and manage the data growth based on the business objectives, in this case, of the building. Previous case, of the data center. Okay? Now let's get into some more fun stuff. How about a smarter city? All right, Woj, tell me about storage and a water faucet. Right? So, think back. The year is 1809. Okay? And the government has just procured $300 to run a water pipe from the city's spring to a building in Pennsylvania Avenue. Everyone know what's on Pennsylvania Avenue? It's a big white domed house thing. All right, so the president decided they wanted running water to get running water. $300. Spring forward, 1850. That spring is no longer being sufficient to the White House and the surrounding blocks. We decide we're going to now make the Potomac River a primary water source. Start digging, laying down pipes, flowing things out, expanding it out to not just the local area, but many, many neighborhoods around the White House. Expansion out dramatically. 1909, the official municipality for the Washington, D.C. water and sewer is established. Okay? Spring ahead to 2000s, 2004, 2005, 2008 timeframe. How do we make it smart? How do you make infrastructure that is pre-Civil War smart? Takes a little work, right? So you start instrumenting drainage off the streets. You start instrumenting water meters. You start instrumenting the flows of water into households and sewage out into the water treatment plants. Understanding the valves that are arguably 100 to 150 years old, instrumenting them to understand when they're going to wear out, right? And start to take advantage of all of the data that's, I was going to say flowing, but that's probably a bad term for a water industry. All of the data that's coming in and doing analytics around it to understand where do we need to upgrade the infrastructure? Do we have a leaky pipe that no one's talked about yet? It could be underground. Can anyone remember there was this disease breakout in Europe back in the late 2000s having to do with bovine? Oh, mad cow, fantastic. Mad cow disease. In June, 31,600 years and seconds. That's a lot, right? 1,200 page views per registered user. I myself am a registered user, and I look at it once a month. Right? I can't imagine what my daughter does. She obviously has to do at least 3,000 or 4,000 to make up just to be average. Right? All right? So this is a problem. Data flowing, devices connected, all creating data. Do we keep it all? Who the heck knows? Chances are maybe. Right? More questions? 75%. Any guess as to what that stat is? Could be anything, right? Don't tell me it's your GPA. Okay? 75% of the world's data is a duplicate. Now, it is in fact true that some of it is good duplication. So what I want to do is I want to kind of talk about one thing we're doing to spend that $100 million. Okay? So if you take a look at the left-hand side here, traditional workloads, storage for traditional workloads, we all know, what we've got today. Over time, you're going to see probably a bifurcation of the type of storage devices that you can buy. One is this notion of storage for high performance, and the other one is for high capacity. Okay? And one of the research projects we actually have going on right now is for that top one up there called Storage Class Memory. I should have put that in white, sorry. Storage Class Memory, SCM. Okay? For high performance. Now, as y'all know, doing demonstrations on infrastructure is always tough. Showing a relative importance and relative scale is always tough. But this is the best I could do. So if you take a look at storage class memory, SCM, and you take a look at the floor space in relative terms that would be needed for a 500 MOPS hard drive. Okay? And you fill them all those hard drives up, and the responsiveness on a floor space that is 16 by 10 or 12, or whatever the case may be, and the actual energy, the power utilization of that entire force plate, 16,000 kilowatts. Okay? Don't ask me if it's per day or per week or per year, whatever. This is just to show you a relative, the order of magnitude and what the research is starting to find. In the year 2020, based on our predictions and based on our experiments that we're running right now, and some actual real-life working prototypes, see that bluish green floor space right there with a typical 500 MOPS hard drive? By 2020, you're going to be looking at this. See that little dot up on the top left? This is a SCM based on technology that's called spintronic. And the type of memory is called racetrack memory. Okay, so today, we all know how our memory and our hard drives and storage devices work, right? You've got readers that move around sometimes. You've got platters that spin, two-dimensional, right? Data on the platter, reliable sometimes, usually not if it's moving, I mean, in relative terms. Well, spintronic technology with racetrack memory, think of it as your data is stored on an atom. Okay, so it's no longer necessarily really magnetic as it relates to the physical properties of the disk. It's magnetizing certain parts of atoms. And instead of it being two-dimensional, right, think of it as being three-dimensional. So it doesn't look like this, but just think about this for a minute. You know how you have kind of like a hard drive with a circular disk in it that has the data on it, or maybe a CD or DVD or something like that with the data on it? Think of a similar structure and not having the data run on ridges of the DVD, let's say, but have the data on things that we call nanowires. Okay, nanowires that are big enough to hold a whole bunch of atoms. And don't think of them as horizontally spinning on a disk, but think of these nanowires standing up like a forest of nanowires. Right? Really, really tall in terms of an atom, but so small you can't even see it. Okay? So you have all these little tiny nanowire tubes sticking up, and on them, three-dimensionally, and on them, each has a racetrack, many racetracks along the nanowire, with atoms spinning around on it, with all of our data. Doesn't that sound fun? Right? So when you think about, when you past few years, right? People said, hey, check this out. I got a flash drive or a hard drive, and it's as big as my fingernail. Right? Think about saying, hey, you know what? I've got a storage device that's smaller than my hair, it can hold 10 petabytes. Right? And by the way, it doesn't use any energy, gives off no heat. Right? Now, I suspect you'll pan around in the lake for it, but the fact of the matter is, from a research perspective, right, we have to progress forward, right? We have to make huge leaps and bounds forward. We have to break the paradigms. We have to. Current rate and pace, it's unsustainable, right? Current rate and pace will maybe knock off 2 or 3 of these squares, as opposed to knocking them all off into being, very, very small piece. Okay? So, I tried to figure out how to wrap up the discussion all in, a slide. So, think about today and into the future, right? We obviously are going to protect your investments in our technologies. We're going to progressively get them better. We're going to progressively allow you to take advantage of new and additional capabilities around tiering, deduplication, and replication, and extreme scalability and performance, and all of the things that you expect out of us as a vendor. But we're also going to extend that into being able to do more analytics, understand the data, be more efficient on what you store, how you store it, when you store it, okay? Take advantage of things in developing new business process and understanding what business process is the most important for you based on your client base, and get you into a more of a proactive, automated, global environment. Okay? the rest of the day today, you know, Oren and Ron and I know Richard and others are going to take us through some of the very near-term things along this long-term strategy. But you should feel comfortable that, you know, it's our job. I view it as my job to make you be successful in yours. That's my job. Okay? I've been in technology for a long time. I know I can, you know, be in other parts of the business and do all the kinds of technology and things like that. But I view my job as to make your job easier, make your job be more successful. That to me is success. Right? Am I going to be perfect? Never. Are your list of requirements longer than I can do? Yes. Right? But at the end of the day, if we can figure out how to get you through your day, right? And be successful in your job, I consider me successful in mine. Okay? I didn't show you a single marketing chart, so I'm going to walk off with one. All right? All right? Okay? You know, IBM, we've been around for a long time, been around for decades. You can see that we're spending a huge amount of money and continuing to be the market leader in technologies and solutions to help you with your infrastructure and your systems, right? Help you become heroes in your companies by using our capabilities. And I expect that to continue going forward. So with that, I was told I should ask for if there are any questions before we take our first break and get ready for the next presenter. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Yes, sir.
So as you move forward with your development efforts, what are the biggest challenges you're faced with?
Okay, so as I move forward with my developments, what are the biggest challenges I face? Well, as I said, you know, the list of requirements is longer than my arm, right? And I'll tell you that the biggest challenge I have is balancing the need of very large, bleeding edge clients, which most of the folks in here are because we don't have very many small businesses in here, with the, let me just call it the rhetoric of, you know, I saw a presentation from this new little startup and their GUI looks really cool like this, or they do this one thing really cool this way, right? And I'm thinking about swapping out your entire thing for this one little thing, right? Now, I understand that it's, you know, all of your jobs to push me to do better and become more consumable and more feature function based on your implementation, your specific implementation, your specific client's implementation, right, Richard? The biggest challenge I face right now is making sure that all of the ITIs, you know, the quote-unquote ITYs that IBM is responsible for, scalability, availability, serviceability, security, reliability, all these ITIs that are inherent in what IBM delivers, right? It's part of our brand value, right? While being able to say, you know, your deduplication ratio, you know, these other guys are marketing it as 12-to-1, and you guys are saying 5-to-1. Well, have you tried theirs? Are you really getting 12? I'm not going to tell you 12 and give you 5. I'm going to tell you 5 and give you 6. Right? So my biggest challenge is delivering what I think you, the user community, and the market needs to be able to sustain my install base, 22,000+ customers out there today, and continue to deliver value to those 22,000, and be able to compete with those little guys nipping at my heels, quote unquote, little guys nipping at my heels. Yes, sir.
So when you were doing when you decided that you're going to roll out some management software, how did you decide which of IBM's competing platforms you were putting on first? So who gets the good stuff first and who has to suck?
So the question is, as we're rolling out our management software, how do we decide on platform coverage? So inside of IBM, typically we have a set of platforms that we say we support on day one. Day 1, day 30, sometimes it's, but at the end of the day, we typically say, on day 1. You think of the major Linux and AIX, and Windows, and et cetera, et cetera. There are others that we are not quote unquote required to support, and we do sometimes based on current install base. It may have been a really cool, popular platform 5 years ago. A lot of customers rolled it out. Can't get off of it very quickly. Those type of things. We may continue to support those even though we're not mandated to. Typically, what happens is that we are required to support X number of platforms, versions like current version -1 or current version -2, right? But from a software group perspective and an IBM perspective, we typically have a list of AIX version this, HPUX version that, Windows version this, etc.
Well, I'm thinking even narrower than that.
Mm-hmm.
So within the IBM software, like
Yes.
P series, Z Linux,
Yes.
Linux on x86, how do you decide then? Which ones of those is going to get?
Well, they're already decided for us. The question is, even within the IBM platforms, what platforms do you decide to do first? If you go on our support site, it'll tell you we support Windows versions this and this. We support versions AIX. We support versions Linux this and this on x86 versus Z Linux, right? And we do that. Now, I will tell you that sometimes it's not available at GA. And if I, for example, decide, what? It's not a big enough client base out there to support Windows. That's not true, but that's an example. I'm not going to support Windows. Then I get to go in front of my boss and my boss's boss and explain to her and him why I'm not going to do that. And as they continue to torture me for an hour or two, why I'm not going to do it, maybe they'll say okay. Chances are they won't, but maybe they'll say okay. If in fact they do say okay, then I get to go to software group. So, Steve Mills is our general manager of software group, and he has determined these are going to be our platforms. We're going to continue to do our platforms. We're going to do current version -1, -2, et cetera, et cetera. I get to go in front of his committee and explain to him why I don't think the Windows platform, for example, is important anymore. Not true. Like I said, I don't want the tool on the web saying we're not going to support Windows anymore. Just an example. I'll tell you, I've done it twice. And the first time, should have been a learning experience. But I have never been the sharpest tool in the toolbox. Okay? So it took me 2 times for Steve Mills to say, Woj, I remember seeing you here before. And if I remember correctly, you walked out saying, okay, boss, I'll support it. Now, I expect in this meeting, you will do the same thing. Now, what's your topic? So the reality is, IBM Software Group has a set of platforms. We're supposed to support them all. Sometimes we go forward with what we call a deviation. They rarely get approved. Sometimes they do. I'm not going to tell you they don't. Sometimes they do. Okay. But if you got a specific issue or a specific problem or a specific strategic question, ping me after the break or whatever. But as a general rule, as a general strategy, we have a set of platforms we support. You're required to support them within 90 days of GA, whatever the case may be. Similar things are starting to happen around hypervisors. Okay, start to think, VMware, things like that, vSphere 5, blah blah blah. But you consider that a platform, so KVM from IBM, VMware, things like that. So I've never seen it contract. Let's put it that way. It always expands, which I am excited about.